I held a lot of resentment toward my mom for many years because I could not understand how she didn't know. I could not understand how you didn't know that this man was sneaking out of your bed and into mine. I still to this day struggle with that a little bit, just the thought. The initial abuse, I've actually gone through a couple of different, I guess, forms of abuse, ultimately being the same. Sexual abuse being the basis of it. Started when I was about 5 years old. There was a cousin, a female cousin of mine that used to come and visit often. And from what I can remember, it just started off as small events leading up to much larger events. You know, she would have me to touch her, or she would try to touch me, you know, in places that people shouldn't be touching other kids. You know, she was a couple years older than me. And I was also admittedly a little bit afraid of her because of where she was from. You know, she was from the projects, and so the project people were known to be tougher, you know, and so for me it was just a matter of, you know, fear and not wanting to upset her. So I did everything that she said, and I remember specifically the culmination of it all and behind my mom's garage at her home that we grew up in. And I remember there being a fruit tree back there, and we were back there picking the fruit off the tree. And she decided to make me touch her, and she, of course, me, and she ultimately wanted me to lick her. And so I had to do that, and I did that. And that was one of the worst memories I have. It was a memory that I tucked away for a very long time. The other abuse started around age 7, and my mom had split up from who I thought to be my father at the time, but that's a whole nother story. And she had a live-in boyfriend at the time who was a firefighter. And I guess he decided that he wanted to sneak into my room. And so that's what started to happen. He would sneak into my room in the middle of the night. And initially, I thought it was a dream. I really didn't believe that it was actually happening, because it would be 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm assuming, you know. And he would come in and he would try to force himself into me. And thankfully that never actually happened, but he would definitely try. And that was painful enough. Mentally and physically, of course. And it happened often, you know, and my mom never knew what was going on. And she would leave me with him a lot, you know, if she went to work or took care of other business, she would leave me there with him. And I had a younger sister. My sister is 4 years younger than me. So I never wanted him to touch her. That was really my ultimate goal. So I stayed always. I know that I easily could have left. I could have gone to my grandmother's house and stayed. You know, I had teachers at school that really cared about me that I could have gone to, but I chose to stay and endure what I was enduring because I figured if I left that he would then turn on her. So I stayed, and there were many occasions that he tried to force himself onto me, make me watch pornographic videos and try to make me do the things that were in the videos and all sorts of weird things that a 7-year-old shouldn't be privy to. So that went on for 4 years. I was 11 years old when it finally came to an end. My mom and grandmother, I remember, had gone out shopping, and they left me with him. I don't even remember where my sister was at the time. But when they came home, I was crying because I had just had enough. When they came home, they were wondering why I was crying, and my grandmother must have just known something wasn't right because her first question to me was, "Did he touch you?" And I said, "Yeah." And I told them that it had been going on for years. And so, of course, my mother put him out right at that moment. And we ended up going through court and things like that for prosecution purposes. He ended up with, I believe, 18 months in prison. But that was it. And so for me, it left me with a lot of anger, a lot of pain, because my family was one of those sweep it under the rug kind of families. So we never again spoke of it, ever. We spoke of it in court. I had to detail and describe the things that he had done to me, but it never was spoken of. Outside of that, I never received counseling or anything. It was just one of those things where you're tough enough to deal with it and we'll just move forward from there. And so that's kind of how it was. And that's what I did, not realizing the overall effect that it actually had and how it would affect the rest of my life. You don't think about those things and how it affects you into adulthood and how it affects the decisions that you make and, the things that you ultimately attract into your life, because this is your way of thinking or, what you think to be normal. You don't realize the effects that it has. So, and apparently your elders don't think that way either. So I dealt with it the best way that I knew how, and that was just it. I held a lot of resentment toward my mom for many years because I could not understand how she didn't know. I could not understand how you didn't know that this man was sneaking out of your bed and into mine. My brain couldn't wrap around that. I still to this day struggle with that a little bit, just the thought. I have, thank God, forgiven her and moved on past that. I don't hold any resentment anymore. But you do still wonder, how does that happen? How do you leave your child with this person? I don't know what her method of thinking was. Whatever it was, she's my mom, and I know that she didn't set out to hurt me. I don't really know what her thought process were to this day. One of the things that I realized about childhood abuse especially is that because your brain is, first of all, not fully developed, it becomes a part of who you are. It molds itself into your development, your emotional development, especially if it's not handled appropriately or effectively in a healthy manner. If you don't deal with it during that time that the person is going through it, or just recently after having gone through it, so that you can deal with it effectively, it starts to shape who you become, and it gets intertwined, unfortunately, with your personality in some way. For me, because it was never dealt with, neither of the abuse situations were ever dealt with. And my mom never knew about the first one, however, until recently. It molded a lot of my decisions and a lot of my behaviors. As I started to get older, when I became a teenager, I became very promiscuous. And I've often heard that people go one avenue or the other. They completely shut down or they become really promiscuous. I obviously chose the promiscuous route. For me, it was a matter of trust, though. I had subsequently dealt with a couple of other issues involving rape and date rape and things like that as I got older. So those things to me just kind of compounded. It was just kind of, and I dealt with them alone again because it was just kind of, okay, well, I've already dealt with this before. So this just goes into the pot and it's just cool, and I'll just deal with it. But it became for me, it brought me to the point where I didn't trust people. I didn't like people. I didn't trust anyone, male, female. I became very bitter, very cold, very angry at the world. It was a really awful situation. And it was more awful for me, I think, internally than the people that dealt with me. Any type of child abuse is an awful experience, but I think when you're violated sexually, it it tears another part of you, a different part, a deeper part of you away than maybe like a physical abuse or something like that. There's just an added piece that's missing. And so for me, sex just became more of a game. Like it was just used to, so that for one, I realized that I had a fear of saying no to people because I felt like if I said no, they were just going to take it anyway. I have felt like my entire life that I have had two people in me fighting all of these years. You know, there's like a good side and a bad side, and I've always felt that. And my only assumption is that it had to come from experiencing these things as a child, because I believe ultimately that I'm a good person. But I think that because I've been through so many traumas, that it put something else in me, and those people were always fighting. And it's always, you know, that person that I call the bad person, you know, is the person who thinks that this type of behavior is okay, you know, that accepts this type of behavior if it comes because, well, whatever, I've accepted it before, it just is what it is, you know. But then I have this other person that knows better, but isn't always strong enough, I guess, to overpower the other thoughts. It's a constant battle between good and bad. And even though I'm healed today, I still, deal with it. Those people fighting each other. I was 16 when I had my first daughter. We kind of grew up together, and I was very overprotective of her and subsequently the rest of my children. Even still to this day, I'm very overprotective of my son even. And my girls, my daughter's now grown, and I'm still very overprotective of her, but I kept them very close to me. It was very hard for me to do daycare and things like that because I had always believed that my mom didn't react appropriately. A part of me always said that if anything ever happened to my kids, it was over, because I know that I wouldn't be able to handle it because I'd already been there and I know the damage that it does. I went through a second marriage in 2004. That marriage was very emotionless. I didn't even like him. So I went into that marriage with the same belief system. By the time that marriage was over, I had just done some growing, and I realized that I had some issues that I needed to deal with. And I remembered, yes, that I had written this book, and that helped me relive a lot of the experiences. And so I kind of turned my attention to self-development. And so I started reading a lot of self-help books and, ways to try to change my way of thinking about people. I literally had been unhappy my whole life. I don't really remember any states of happy at all. And that's crazy, to be in your 30s and never have been happy. That to me was huge. And it was a realization that hit me very hard. And I had to figure out how to be happy. I had to figure that out. Nobody could give that to me. Nothing that I tried in my entire life was able to provide me with happy. I tried the marriage. I tried, I had the kids and I loved them, don't get me wrong, but, I couldn't get that from them. Nothing was giving that to me. And so I had to realize that it was something inside of me that I had to change, obviously, in order for me to obtain what it was I was looking for. So I just set out on a mission to find happy. Like, that was just my mission. Like, I have to be able to smile and mean it. Like, that's what I wanted. I wanted to be able to smile and actually feel what my face was showing. And so that's where my life was at that point. I was actually on my way to a church one Sunday morning. Somehow I ended up at a different church. And when I walked through the doors of that church, I literally felt weight lifted off me. Like I felt 100 pounds lighter. And it was very weird. I wasn't expecting it at all. I wasn't even ready for it completely, I don't think. But upon entering the service and what started out with the choir, I don't think I stopped crying the whole time, from the time I walked in until the time that I got in my car. And that happened subsequently each Sunday thereafter. And it seemed as though the pastor who was speaking directly to me and some issue that I was trying to deal with. And I was stuck there. I needed this. This was what I had been looking for. So it was this God that my grandmother introduced me to when I was younger, that kept me in church all the time, that I had kind of turned my back on over the years. And that's what gave me the happy that you see before you today. It took that spiritual aspect to help to heal me. I had realized that I hadn't gone through any healing processes. Yes, I had done a lot of self-development and I had matured in thought processes and things like that, but I hadn't actually healed or dealt with any of the things of my past. Again, I had never even thought again about the abuse that my cousin put me through. I had to deal with that. The pastor one Sunday spoke about forgiveness, and I think this is what started me on my path to healing and forgiving and things. He said, not forgiving is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. And that hit me like a ton of bricks, because that's how I've been living my whole life. I have had this resentment toward all of these people in my life. And I had resentment toward people that never even did anything to me. I just didn't like people, period. And so I had to realize in that moment that the problem was me. It wasn't, the whole world wasn't crazy. It was me that was the problem. And so I am the one that needed to do the healing. I am the one that needed to fix me so that I can find this happy that I'm looking for. So that's what started the process. And I started right there in that moment. And I just started to let go of things and just pray and just ask for help with letting go and just, coming to terms with the things that happened to me and why they happened to me. And ultimately there had to be a larger goal, a bigger picture, and at that point I didn't realize that it was to maybe help someone one day that was going through these situations. Up until that point, it was me. Why did this happen to me? Why am I going through this? And not realizing that it's not really about me. And it's not. And that's about January is when that realization hit me. And it was like, you know what? Yeah, you went through these things, but you're still here. Obviously, you were strong enough to endure what you endured because you're standing here today. So there is some elements of you that is a very strong person, and somebody else needs that. Somebody needs you to tell them that they are beautiful and that they mean enough, that it's not their fault that this happened to them. Somebody out there in the world needs to hear that from you. And so you need to take you out of it and focus on helping someone else, because that's ultimately what it's about. And so that brought me joy. That brought me a joy that I had never, ever had before. And so that's kind of where my healing came from. It came from taking me out of the picture.